Od Yoter Tov, Tamidi Elaytzur. I'm sure everyone's familiar with this new, passionate, exciting, and emotional song that has come out in the Jewish world, and everyone's also familiar with it. Much of it discusses the fact that Hashem ohev oti, with the tremendous love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves me and I love him, and therefore tiyeli ashirut, that I'll have riches, I'll have parnasah, there will be zivugim, there will be health, there will be briut, and everything will be fantastic. And I wanted to, a little bit, if I can say, dissect, not the actual song, but this concept, and try to be able to figure out what we could learn from these concepts, especially over here, now that we're in Parshat Bo, which is everything to do with Yetziat Mitzrayim, the idea of Avat Hashem, the love and passion that we have for Kadosh Baruch Hu, our relationship with Hashem at the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Is the Ramban writes at the end of Parshat Bo, one of, or probably the most famous Ramban on the planet, and over here he writes about the fact that Yetziat Mitzrayim has everything to do with Emunah in Hashem and Avat Hashem, our relationship with Hashem. And like I said, based on the words of the previous song, I want to dissect this concept for a few minutes. There is a truth, but unfortunately an extended amount of mistake, of a fallacy that gets into people's mind where they overlap two very important concepts. A very Jewish concept is something known as a Karas Tov. Anyone who is known as a Kafui Tov, someone who doesn't appreciate what is given to him, someone who is ingrateful, as what's known as an ingrate, is a very anti-Jewish concept. We know that we are big people that understand the idea of a moide ani, of saying a gedank, of saying thank you to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Of course, being a kafui tov is something that is very neged yahadut, neged to do with our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But many times, and yes, in Sfarim I'm not saying it doesn't appear that way, we connect that with the idea of Avat Hashem also, meaning a Karata Tov to Hashem, and Memela automatically Avat Hashem, our relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Avat Hashem, and to other people, and especially to our spouse. In other words, many times the connection that we make is between the idea of a Karata Tov and automatically the idea of Ahava. Very famously, Rav Dessler has a piece in Kuntras HaChesed where I'm going to expand and take it a little bit out of the more famous part. And that is where he tries to remove this idea from being understood as a prime type of Ahava. And this is based on two reasons, which he doesn't exactly speak out 100% there, but this is what he means to say. First of all, the classic example that we know, when you say that I love food, or I love Danishes, or I love fish is the normal example, but I love a piece of steak, or I love a certain type of vacation, most of the time means those places and things and objects that you are referring to that you love is just a love of oneself. In as much as you know that it does good for you, that I get out of it, it's what the Sefer Ikarim refers to as Avat HaMoyel, something that is beneficial for me, something that I get to enjoy, something that I get a credible amount of. And that is a type of ahava, that is one type of ahava, but it is a little bit more of what we call a self-love. When we refer to the idea of ahavta l'recha kamocha, it goes even a little bit beyond this concept. If we love HaKadosh Baruch Hu only because He gave us life, which is incredible, and we look into the world and appreciate everything that He gave me, and all the things that we have, that's fantastic. Od Yoter Tov, Od Yoter Tov, the more He gives me, the more He gives me. Yes, that will bring a certain level of Ava. But as I want to point out, this type of Ava has two problems. First of all, it has a sakana. It has a certain danger to it. Because it's what we call an Ava tluya b'davar. It's dependent on an external factor, and therefore it has wear and tear. Therefore it has an expiration date. That type of Ava is not everlasting, because as much as it's totally on something else, so like we said, it's fantastic if He gives me parnasah, and He gives me briut, and He gives me health, and He gives me zivugim, and all my shidduchim work out fantastic. Oh, I love you, Hashem, you're the best. Thank you so much for what you did. But what happens when it doesn't always work out? When we give those fantastic stories in the war of those people that made it out on October 7th, or those people that happened not to be there on September 11th during the Twin Towers. Those are fantastic stories that it can bring out a certain love. But what happens to the parent whose child was in the building at the wrong time? What about the child whose parents were in are in Gaza right now presently as captives, are they also singing the songs of Od Yoter Tov and Od Yoter Tov? If our Ava is completely dependent on what I'm receiving from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and of course we're always receiving, don't get anything wrong here, but sometimes it's limited. Sometimes it leaves things a little bit handicapped. It puts me in a place where I don't know where my Ava, where my love is holding. It leaves it in a place that is a little bit dangerous. A classic example, and the most simple example, would be one's love to a spouse. One who loves his wife because she's just great in the house. She's so good with the kids. She's a great cook. She takes care of the house. She does everything they need. In many cases, she makes the parnasa. Maybe she brings in the dough. And she takes care of what needs to be done. Fantastic. I love her. She's fantastic. Again, that's an ava that is dependent on external factors. And again, it probably means it's an ava which is much more of an ava of yourself. What happens when things are not clean? What happens when she's getting too old to deal with this stuff? What happens when we find certain personality traits which I didn't expect? What happens when she gets angry? What happens when she's not dealing with the kids the way she used to? What happens when her patience has been given in? What happens when you start noticing that she has serious anxieties that you never knew about previously? Suddenly, the ava's pug v'hoilech. Suddenly, it might dissipate. Suddenly, that love, that connection, that affection that I had, maybe that wasn't as real as I thought. But the answer is, it was a little bit of a facade. Like I said, it's dangerous, but even more than that, it's almost a sheker. It's a love which is true, and it's a certain level of love, but it's almost a facade. It's a fallacy, so to speak, because you're not really loving her, you're kind of loving yourself. You're loving everything that she does for you, you're loving your personal interest that you're getting, and you should have a karata tov. There's a meat of a karata tov, an appreciation, and thank you, and every day you should appreciate every little thing that you get. Of course. However, when your whole entire passion, love, and your connection, your affection is built on it, you're putting yourself on a very fine tooth comb. You're putting yourself in a very fine line. You're not going to be able to get out of it. And it's the same thing with our avid for our friends or our avid for our Kodesh Baruch Hu. It can't only be on that type of level. The real type of ava comes from an ava, which in these days is a little bit, we say that type of ava in reference to our children, which is a little bit not connected with any strings attached. We talk about a certain love which is non-conditional. Unconditional love, as the expression goes, which is not always the best for children. I'm not giving a chinuch share right now, so I'm not going to get into that. But kopanim, it comes from a sake of loving for loving itself. It comes from a sake of loving, in the words of Rav Desser, to actually give to that person. As we know, parents love their children more than the children love the parents. And that's because of how much they gave over to the children. They see a piece of themselves in their children, and they feel much more connected. But it doesn't necessarily come from something that I've received. The halacha is v'halachta bedrachav. We have to go in the ways of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. What's the way to a Kadosh Baruch Hu? Kadosh Baruch Hu does chesed for us. He does everything. Why? He doesn't get anything from us. Zero. Be'etzem, he doesn't need us. He doesn't get anything from us. V'halachta, he does chesed just for the sake of chesed. His love for us, this midah, and that we're learning in Parshat Bo by Yetziat Mitzrayim, the midah in Pesach. In the Moed of Pesach, we talk about Avat Hashem comes from how much He gives to us, and how much He cares about us, and everything is L'Shem Shamayim. That's really the type of love that we're trying to get for, a warm, comfortable type of feeling, to be able to relate to the person for who he is, similar to how we understand our love for our children. But the more you are loving and you give over to that person just because he is him or just because she is her, you live to, and you try to give to that person as much as you can. Your nachat, your ahava comes from there. A person who has a real affection for someone else is happy to give that person a present with no returns. I'm happy to give you a surprise. I'm happy to buy you that little ring that I knew you were looking for. I know I'm happy to give you a little bit of a surprise, which is, it could be just almonds outside in a place, or flowers, or chocolates, or anything that you know that specific person enjoys. And you, from that ava, the point comes from you, from the giver, not necessarily from the taker. I'm going to give you a prime example of this, and with this we're coming to a close, where I was able to witness this. In my shul about a decade ago, there was a person who was there who was very into giving little vadim, little chaburas for kiru, for people who were chiloni, non-religious, and he was helping them out, getting them back on the derech. One time I noticed a certain guy there, he was in his upper 20s or whatever it was, and I said to Simcha, and he was very into the shir, and he was very exasperated about the whole entire situation. I spoke to the Rebbe on the side once when nobody was around after hours, and I asked him, what's with this boy? When he looks very into it, and he seems very on the right path. He told me an unbelievable story. He said, let me tell you about this guy. And again, this is here in Eretz Yisrael. This guy is a top soccer player. He plays an unbelievable game. He's so good that he was a center. He was a prime player for one of these Maccabi teams somewhere in this country. I don't remember which one. I really could care less. He was playing for Maccabi, and he was making a very nice parnasa. And if I could also point out, that's basically what this types of people, that's usually what their parnasa is, nothing else. And as he's being mitchazek, when he's getting stronger, he got into a tremendous query, a pickle. He wasn't sure what to do because, unfortunately, Rachmana litzlan, even here in Israel sometimes, these soccer players have to play on Shabbat. Lo aleinu velo alechem. Anyway, so he didn't know what to do. Should he continue the game? So the Rav was speaking to me a little bit in halacha, and I went through all the halachic shilas. Well, can he get a hotel nearby? Yeah, he actually could. We were discussing if there was ways, to get around it, because he wasn't holding yet at making the jump into the deep end to be able to completely relinquish everything. That was the question that was asked. As we were discussing the concept, I spoke to him about a certain idea, and he actually went through with it. This was, again, a little bit over 10 years ago. He went to the great Rav Yosef. This player went with his Rebbe, with his Rav, and they went to Rav Yosef to ask about the situation. There's going to be an eruv, what's the grass, you're next to the hotel. Rav Yosef looked at him in the eye after he asked the question, and gave, as everybody knows, his cute little slaps that he used to give when he would see people in a very beloved way. And he started quoting psukim from here till tomorrow. V'shamu b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat l'Toratam, zachor et yom Shabbat l'kadsho, v'yichal l'kim et kol menachto asher asa. He quoted psukim and psukim and psukim. He said for about 5 minutes, he was quoting every memra, every pasuk, every line in the Gemara that had to do with the idea of Shmirat Shabbat. All the while, slap, 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 back and forth, slap, 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 back and forth. I was hearing the story, I'm like, oh man, what happened there? Ooh, that must have been a very traumatic experience. He said he walked outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he walked outside of the office of Rav Vaj, and that was the whole speech. That was it. He walked outside, and the boy said, I feel like I just went to the mikvah. I feel like I was just purified. I became a pure soul. And he threw it off and he said, forget about it. I'm never playing another game again. He went and he left the league in order to become mitchazek. And again, what kind of parnasa are these guys going to get? This is his parnasa. It wasn't that he was the most educated person in the world, but this is the beauty that sometimes of real ahava. Real ahavat Hashem comes from self-sacrifice, from you giving, just like we say the parents love their children because they give them their whole life. So too, real ahavat Hashem is not so much to see what Hashem's giving me, if it's the parnasa, if it's the briyut, it's a zivugim, and of course we're always asking for it, we daven and we want it, and we want to have that relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and it definitely helps, and it's, yes, a type of ahava, and I'm not denying that. Of course, the Sefer Ikrim brings it as the first type of ahava. But he says the Ikr type of ahava, and this is written in many, many of the Sfarim, is way above that. And that's the ahava of just loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu because of His greatness, for who He is, and what I, kebiyochol, ki'ilu, can give to Him. Suddenly, ki'ilu, I see a piece of myself in Him. Suddenly, there's a magnetic pull between us, kebiyochol. Suddenly, I feel that much more connected. The second I'm willing to leave some of my comfort zones, to make a certain type of sacrifice, to be able to learn a few extra minutes when I really didn't expect it, or to go ahead and in a place where I find myself out on a trip and there's no real kosher food, but there's that half a hechsher with the OR on it, the Orthodox Rabbinut for the OR. So, and I go ahead and I midgaber and I override that Yetzer Hara, or when I'm dealing with a business deal and I just have to pull a couple strings, not straight sheker, but just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of stray honesty, and suddenly I'm going to find myself cutting a very good deal, or when I feel that need to just get angry, get upset, or to blow, or to somehow break some of my midot in the household. when someone is giving me just a little bit too much criticism, or someone's bothering me too much, or when it's time to be able to get out of bed, and whether it's going to make it for minyan on time or not, those extra 5 minutes, we all know, oh, the pillow is so plush. There's nothing juicier than the pillow at early in the morning when it's dafka, when it's time to get up. When it's not time to get up, it's not comfortable. It's dafka when the alarm clock goes off. Wow, how comfortable it is. Those minutes are chiyut. That's avat Hashem. Those sacrifices, that's where real love of a Kadosh Baruch Hu will come from. That's really building the connection. The Kotzkerov used to say that to die on Kiddush Hashem, das is nishkin kunst. That's not necessarily the kunst. That's not the ideal. That's not the fabric, the cream of the crop, like our cousins, the Arabs, like to do. Rather, he says, to live on Kiddush Hashem, to live by Kiddush Hashem, dos is a kunz. He said, now that's mamano, that's something to live by. To be able to live on Kiddush Hashem, to be able to make those needs, to sacrifice sometimes my personal interest to be able to do it, that's the real ava. That's called an ava she'eina tluya b'davar. That's a real ava which is without any outside factors. And even in times when I don't understand what's going on in my life, specifically in the times when the parnasa is not there, specifically in the times when the briyut is not there, a little bit of problems financially or health-wise, or the shidduchim are just not going as I expected. I raised my daughter so perfect, and I'm still stuck. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong, and here it is, Shloimi, she's been going, his daughter went out 2 months and already she got a top shidduch. What's going on here? On that we say every day, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Don't just have in mind, a little bit of Achdut Hashem, but have in mind the Bechol Me'odecha. What's Bechol Me'odecha? Bechol Mida Umida Shehu Moided Lach. Any Mida, anything that a Kadosh Baruch Hu gives me, even when it's uncomfortable, over there, and specifically over there, that is where I want to give to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Bechol Levavcha. That's real Avat Hashem. That's the sacrifice. That's what we're learning over here by Yetzias Mitzrayim. When we went out of Mitzrayim, we realized that we're HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Bubala, and He is our Tati, and we love Him. We love Him. Why? Why do you love your father? Because He's your father. Not necessarily more because He's giving you things. You might already be an adult and He's not giving you a penny. He might be an 80-year-old man, which you have to roll him around in a wheelchair and give him an extra room in the house, but you love Him because He's Tati. He's your father, and it doesn't make a difference. And that is the real understanding of our Father, of our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, that goes over and beyond any boundaries. Ve'od yoter tov, ve'od yoter tov. But you should know, with Od Yoter Tov, and even when it's not Od Yoter Tov, you should still know that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is Tamid Ohev Oti. The Iker line over there is Tamid Ohev Oti. Yes, Hashem always loves you, and He's always loved you, and it's even when it's lo tov, even when it's not on the realms that you were expecting. Why? Ki Hashem Yitbarach Tamid Ohev Oti.